Welcome to Climate Catalysts. I'm Chloe, and in this series, I ask leaders in the climate space 3 questions with an aim of providing you insight about what has driven these people's successes. Together, we also learn from these industry leaders how us young people can be proactive and make an impact as the climate continues to change. Today, I chatted with Professor Greg Metha, who is leading a team at the University of Adelaide developing a novel manufacturing method for green hydrogen. Recounting on his experiences as an academic and innovator, in this segment, Greg shares sound advice and interesting perspectives. Hi, Greg. Thank you so much for joining me today. Firstly, I wanted to ask you, what has maybe driven you, do you think, to want to become this leader who's actually creating a solution to try to combat the climate crisis?
Well, hi, Chloe. It's nice to be on your podcast. Yes, so my work relating to renewable energy has been relatively new in my career. So I've been an academic for many decades now. And what I had been working on in my time at Adelaide was I'd been working on understanding fundamental properties of very, very small metal particles, which we call metal clusters. And these metal clusters can act as ultra efficient catalysts. And catalysts actually make the world go round, or they actually drive a lot of the chemical processes going on in the world. And in fact, there are some numbers thrown around that 80% of global GDP involves a catalyzed reaction in some way. And all of these reactions, most of these reactions, involve transformation of chemicals associated with the petrochemical, so oil and gas transformations. So I was there working in a field where I was trying to make better catalysts. I was in a field where we know that it's got some excess baggage in terms of the petrochemical industry. We know it's directly linked to climate change. And it just got me thinking about how can I get involved with research that can try to present a solution. So as I was going on this work, and this is probably over about the last decade or so, I've been developing now catalysts for renewable energy. And specifically, one of the catalysts that we were interested in is a process that's called photocatalysis. So I know we'll talk more about photocatalysis later on, but it's really the direct conversion of using energy, ideally light from the sun, so solar energy, plus water to give you hydrogen. And so it's been a fairly long and convoluted journey. And it wasn't something I set out to do initially, but this is where I've ended up. And just about the vast majority of my research now is being directed towards this goal.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you for that. And so, yeah, I just wanted to come and ask you, what skills, both like hard and soft skills, have been really important for you as you work to be an innovator, doing your research, really trying to really do something pretty incredible?
So obviously, I'm a professor of chemistry at the University of Adelaide. So obviously, I needed to do chemistry. So I from high school chemistry, then went on to complete chemistry at university, got a degree, then went on did a PhD in chemistry and worked in various fields doing chemistry, all focused on research, as I touched on the answer to the previous question. And chemistry has been important for where I am now because it's all understanding chemical processes. But other things that I found have been very important is just quantitative skills. So even I know that chemistry is not for everybody. I go to parties and people say, "What do you do?" And they sort of screw up their faces when I say chemistry, and they sort of, I had a terrible time or could never understand chemistry. And that's all well and good, but I think just being quantitative, being able to understand numbers so that you can do two things in particular. One is you can compare different approaches, but doing it from a quantitative perspective, from an analytical perspective. So when we talk about what's a solution, you understanding putting a numerical value on that solution and being able to compare that numerical value with another numerical value. So that's really important. I always encourage students, particularly when I talk about giving course advice to students entering into university, I tell people to do maths as to a higher level as they possibly can. I know maths, again, is not for everybody, but just do as high a level as you possibly can, because being quantitative is vitally important in this. The second aspect of being quantitative is being able to work with numbers and large numbers. So we're going to start talking about things happening on a global scale. As soon as you start thinking about things happening on a global scale, the numbers get very large. And the ability that you can understand, you can quickly multiply exponentials, mega, giga, exa, all those things. It just makes it so much easier to understand what the big picture is and not get daunted by these larger numbers. So I think that's my answer to your question about the hard skills. In terms of the soft skills, I think this is something that in my time at school, we weren't necessarily explicitly taught those. And it's something that I've had to learn on the job. And it's become actually more and more important as I've developed in my career, particularly as my research group has grown. So certainly communication, written and verbal. And the reason why this is important is because you need to be persuasive. You need to say to people, hey, I'm asking you for money, and you need to be very persuasive about why they should give you money. It's not only, it's then also communicating not only with funding bodies, but also with your peers. So as an academic, I'm expected to write papers. So I need to be able to communicate clearly and effectively with those people that have the similar sort of knowledge that I have. And more recently, I've been doing a lot of public engagements. So the ability to send a message out to the public, to a generalized audience, and to sort of lower the level of complexity and technical aspects down so that people appreciate the message, but they don't necessarily need to know all of the nitty gritty. So hopefully that will come through today, where I try to make things a bit simpler. So communication is certainly a key one. Other things that have become more important as my group has developed is certainly leadership and strong interpersonal skills. I have a research group quite diverse, ranges from PhD students through to research people, technical people. So to be able to communicate with them, to make them understand that what pathway we're on, to engage with them. They all have different personalities. You need to be able to respect their perspective. You need to have empathy with them. So I think that's important as well. Again, I work with other people within the university. So recently I've had to work with our commercialization team. I've had to learn with patent lawyers. So people coming from very different perspectives of life. And you need to be able to communicate with these people and to get on with them. So that's really important as well. Time management. I think for a time I wasn't very good at it, but I've learned to become better at it. And what I would say is very, very important is learning to be able to carve time out for oneself. So having a break from work and being able to do something separate. You just can't do work all the time. You need to freshen up the brain by doing something very, very different. So I think that's very important as well. Other soft skills, I think problem solving, and I guess this is something I've always been able to do, look left field, out of the box solutions, etc. So that's something that as an academic, it's critical for us to be able to do. So I think that's it for my range of hard and soft skills that I would encourage people to try to develop as they go through their own learning journey.
I definitely want a great advice there, and you probably already answered my final question when I was going to ask you if you could provide a piece of advice. But yeah, there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom there. But I guess specifically, do you have one really strong message, if only one thing to take away from this segment, Climate Catalyst, about perhaps a young person that wants to become a leader like yourself?
Absolutely, I do. And it's different, as well as developing all of those skills, it's essential. It's also to understand the picture. So I would say, there's an axiom, think global, act local. It's important to understand the global scheme of things. What is the issue? How do we solve it on a global scale? So I would recommend that if people aren't already aware, that they familiarize themselves with the United Nations development of what they call Sustainable Development Goal, SDGs. Now, you may be taught about these at school. Are you taught about them at school? Yeah. You are. So be aware of what they are. There's 17 of them. Number 7 is all about energy. So that's the one that I'm intimately involved with. So be aware of that. Another thing globally is there's a relatively new concept that's been that's evolved come out of a group in Sweden, the Stockholm Resilience Center, and that is the idea of planetary boundaries. Have you been taught about planetary boundaries? So this is the idea that the world is a finite entity, and that there are certain boundaries that we shouldn't go beyond. And they've broken it down into 9 separate categories. One of them is climate change. So thankfully, we haven't passed that boundary yet. But there are 2 boundaries that we have passed, which is most worrisome. One is biodiversity or loss of biodiversity. So we've transgressed what these people have defined as a boundary. So we've passed that. The other one that people aren't aware is nitrogen flow. So we are creating so much nitrogen, we are fixing nitrogen artificially to make ammonia, to eventually make fertilizers, that we are now producing more. We have now more fixed nitrogen on Earth, or we've doubled the amount of fixed nitrogen than what we previously have. So we have exceeded that boundary, and there are 7 other boundaries that where we are putting pressure on the Earth system. And so we need to be aware, where are the pressure points going to be? Because if we're going to act to try to stop those boundaries from being passed, we need to understand what they are. Significant work that the Stockholm group has done on this is made all of these boundaries quantitative. So they put numbers on them. So we can measure, we can say, how far are we from that? How far have we transgressed these boundaries? So that's what I would say to the people who are interested. Understand the global picture. About the act locally, I would say that think about yourself, think about learning something every single day. At the end of each day, reflect, what have I learned today? Think back on the day and just take a few minutes and say, what did I do today? I did that, I did that. Did I do something constructive? I always say to my family here, that I bore them witless, I say, I'm a striver. I like to strive. What are you striving for? And with part of that striving, you need to understand what your strengths are. So this comes back to what your skills are. If your skills aren't in mathematics, if they're not about understanding quantum mechanics or calculus, what are your skills good at? And look and see how they mesh with the Sustainable Development Goals, and see where you can make a difference, because everybody can make a difference.
Oh, that's really great pieces of advice, and thank you for talking with us in this segment of Climate Catalysts.
My pleasure, Chloe.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe to Dynamic Climate Now to stay informed and inspired by the dynamic intersection of climate change and business innovation.